Right. Okay, so welcome to this nutrition webinar. My name is Devon, and I got a little presentation for us. Before we start, I just want to bring the disclaimer that I'm not a registered dietitian. There are people who dedicate their lives to studying nutrition specifically for different people with different illnesses and specific diet plans and stuff like that. And obviously I'm not a doctor, but I'm just going to share some of the basics because you really don't need to be a doctor to understand how to eat healthy, fuel your body properly, and manage your weight, whether it's loss, gain, whatever. So with that being said, hopefully you guys learned something, and remember that nutrition is very individualized. What works for somebody else, won't work for everybody, of course. So first I want to explain a little bit about macronutrients. If you've heard this term, it basically just is macro means big. So it's the big, just general ways of classifying food, which is energy. There's calories, and then you can break it down further into three things. There's carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And this is basically just the form and the building blocks of the different calories and how they're used in our body. So carbohydrates, obviously we hear this a lot. This is our breads and pastas, and it's recommended to have 45 to 65% of our total caloric needs from carbohydrates, and protein would be around 10 to 35% of your total calories, fat around 20 to 35% of your total calories. I'll go into a little more detail on both of them, but basically carbohydrates and protein are both 4 calories per gram. Now fat, I don't have it written up there, but fat is 9 calories per gram, meaning if you weigh it out, you have a gram of each. Fat is going to be a lot more caloric. It's denser and it takes up less space, but it carries more calories. Protein and carbohydrates are going to be less caloric and take up more space. They have that volume in the meal that really just makes it big. For example, oil and fat, it's takes up a tiny amount, but has a lot of calories. So carbohydrates are basically, you hear them as energy. There are quick sources of energy. So what that means is if you're doing a really fast sprint, so you're going as fast as possible, something you can only maintain for 10 seconds to 2 minutes at a time before you're okay, I'm completely gassed, I cannot go any harder. What your body is using for fuel during that type of intense activity is carbohydrates. If you've taken biology, there's special, we can get into this for days, but basically that's what you're using for quick fuel. Now obviously we eat carbohydrates even when we're not doing stuff like sprints, and our body just first puts it into the bloodstream, and then when the bloodstream is kind of full, it stores it as glycogen, which is basically carbohydrates that it puts into a form that it can store. And then as our blood sugar gets low, our body can take carbohydrates out of that glycogen storage and back into the bloodstream. So we have hormones that regulate to make sure we got the right amount of sugar in the bloodstream. The reason sugar kind of can mess things up is that if you eat a ton of sugar all at once, it's already broken down into its smallest form. So if you imagine a carbohydrate as really complex, like a link of a ton of puzzle pieces together, you eat it and your body has to break it down into all the individual puzzle pieces in order for it to use it, and then it puts them back together into glycogen for later. But when you eat sugar, it's already broken down into these tiny pieces, so it all goes into the bloodstream. And if you just continually do this, it can cause problems with the hormones because it's just not used to having that much sugar in the bloodstream, basically. Not that sugar is bad, it's just that when you eat so much of it all the time. I put fiber in here. Fiber is not really I just went with this into carbohydrates because a lot of times you can tell if a carbohydrate is quote high quality, meaning unprocessed and good complex, is if it has a lot of fiber in it. So a good way to tell this is to look at a nutrition label and see how many grams of fiber it has, and what you can do is multiply it by 10 and see if it's greater or less or close to the amount of total carbs in it. So for example, before this webinar started, I looked up quinoa, and it said the one I was looking at for the nutrition label said it had 2.9 grams of fiber. So 2.9 does not sound like much, but it had 25 grams of total carbohydrates in it. So what you do is you take 2.9, multiply it by 10, and you get 29. 29 for the fiber, while the total carbohydrates is 25, means that there's a lot of fiber in there. It's just a good way to tell because it has more of that when you multiply it by 10 than the total grams of carbs. Or if it's close, then it's pretty fibrous. Does that make sense? I know I'm talking pretty quick through all of this. So if you guys have any questions or want me to elaborate further, let me know. All right, moving on to fat. So fat has a lot of functions in the body. It helps us absorb vitamins. For example, some vitamins can only be absorbed through fat, hormones, and it's also protection and warmth. Obviously, when our body fat gets too low, there can be lots of problems in the body, especially for women and the menstrual cycle. So fat's pretty important to have in your diet. And there's also different types of fat. There's unsaturated and saturated in very basic terms. Unsaturated is what they're telling us now that we need to get more of, simply because a lot of people don't get enough of the unsaturated fats. And that can be because it's really easy for us to pour sauce and oils and cook our food in butter in our foods. And a lot of this stuff comes from animal fats. So normally most Americans get a lot of animal fats, but the things that are nuts, fish, eggs, and like those plant-based sources of fats, like I have in the picture avocado, those are all pretty much plant-based sources. We don't get as much of those. So it can be good to focus on getting that type of fat. Can have a lot of benefits for our health rather than always consuming animal fats like butter and fatty meats and stuff. Just correlation has been shown to those types of fats been eating in excess and health problems. So, all right, next up, protein. We love to talk about protein. Protein is composed of these things called amino acids. And these are basically like, another good analogy is like a link of sausages. Like if you see them, there's like little sausages and they're all connected on a rope. And you can basically think of that as each one is an amino acid. And then when you put them all together, it's a protein. And these are the building blocks of muscle, tissue, organs. So it's what we use to like build stuff in our body. And then it also has tons of processes and roles in the body in regards to transportation, messengers, keeping our immune system healthy, so many things that it does for us. Now, there are all these amino acids that make up protein. And depending on the amino acid specifically, it has a different role in the body, and it kind of determines what it's going to be used for. So for example, there's certain amino acids that is like, oh, these ones are going to be used for hormones, like sending hormones to the body. And then it's like, oh, these are the best for building muscle. So these ones are going to be used for building muscle. This one is going to help us sleep. So it's very important that we get a wide variety of amino acids. Now, some amino acids, the body can build on its own. Inside the body, they can just take foods that we eat and build it themselves. But some of them, or like some of these amino acids are called essential, which means that we cannot produce them ourselves and we have to eat them. And there are 9 of those. Pretty much with essential amino acids, the point with this is that you just want to make sure you're eating a variety of different protein sources, because if you're constantly only eating one protein source, then you could be missing out on an essential amino acid, and then you could have like a deficiency, something might not work right. Most animal proteins, I will say, are complete proteins, meaning they have all 9 of those essential amino acids already in them. As for plant-based proteins, a lot of them only have some of the essential amino acids, but this really isn't an issue as
It's not just me, huh? She's gone.
Yeah, I think you might try to come back. Hopefully.
Yeah, I guess give her a few minutes.
Yeah.
I can never tell if like I'm the one having internet issues or someone else is.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's working, but I can't hear anything. Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me? Oh, great. I'm back. Thank you. All right, and it's still recording. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen again. Sorry about that. I lost power for a second. It's a bad hurricane. I was teaching this morning and I lost power in class as well. So that was not good. Let me go back to this. So I was talking about protein when that happened. Oh, I was talking about amino acids and in plant-based sources. Basically, I just wanted to say that if you eat things, this is called like combination proteins. And basically, as long as you're eating plant-based sources with another type. So if you think of the categories as legumes, which is a fancy word for beans and peanuts, and then grains like rice and quinoa bread that has protein. And then there's the protein in seeds and nuts. And then there's dairy. And as long as you're eating them in different combinations, you can pretty much get all the essential ones in one meal, which is going to happen naturally without you even trying most of the time. If you're eating vegetarian, you're going to have like rice and beans together. Oh, that's legumes and grains. Or you're going to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which is also legumes and grains. Or grilled cheese, grains and dairy. So it usually happens naturally, but it's just a good reason to eat a variety of sources. All right, so when it comes to these macronutrients, this is a very basic generalized guideline. I said carbs around 45 to 60%. So here's what that looks like. Carbs at 50%, proteins at 20, and fat is at 30. Yeah, so that's what it looks like on the pie chart in terms of calorie composition. But like I said, fat is a lot denser. So on your plate, you would see it would look differently on your plate when you calculate the fact that protein and carbs both have 4 calories per gram and fat has 9 calories per gram. So for example, if you're eating a 2,000 calorie diet, I'm not saying you need to be eating this number. We'll talk later about how you can figure out what number you should be eating. But this is just 2,000 calories is easy to calculate. So that would be, for example, 250 grams of carbs, 100 grams of protein, and 67 grams of fat. So I know those might seem just like random numbers to you guys. So I'm going to try and put some things in perspective for you. I found this picture. I did not measure this out myself and take it. I'm just going to take the word for it that looks about right to me. There's about 50 grams of carbs on each plate. So if you were eating 250 grams of carbs, you could eat 5 of these plates in a day, and then you'd be good for your carbs. That's just one example. This is an example of something I was like, oh, we all eat at Sweetgreen probably if you go to GW, and maybe you don't like salads, but you came here to this nutrition webinar. So this is the Harvest Bowl. It has 705 calories, and of those, there's 38 grams of fat, and that's with the light dressing on it. It says on the website, because you can get light, medium, or heavy. And then there's 56 grams of carbs, 39 grams of protein. So just looking at the composition, you can see that if you're eating, 67 grams of fat, you already would have gotten a lot of your fat for the day just from that. 39 grams of protein is a lot of protein in one meal. I will say that's pretty good because you have that, all that chicken and kale and nuts and stuff. But you would still have a decent amount to go. So you'd still have like 60 grams left. Carbs, pretty low. You can see only 31% of the meal. So you would have a lot of carbs left after that. Yeah, any questions about this? All right. So here I just wanted to say that, you know, macronutrients, it's not like the main picture. You can't, just because you might have the right macronutrient ratio doesn't mean you're necessarily getting a lot of micronutrients. And micronutrients, micro means small, so that would be your vitamins and your minerals that are really important to get, you know, like vitamin C, vitamin D, A, E, K, all that stuff. I won't go into every one of those because basically all you have to know is
All right, I think I'm gonna call it. Have a good night, though, Lily.
Okay, bye.
all right. Sorry guys, again, another power outage. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay, yeah. That's fine. So let's get back to it. We really are almost done. Oh, I don't know what that is. And here we go. All right, so you got to get your vitamins and minerals. Oh yeah, basically plants in general are just going to have all your vitamin sources, pretty much fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean meats, things like that. If you pretty much, the reason I want to mention this is because one of the things that a lot of people do is they eat a ton of processed foods, just enough to fit their like macros, their macronutrient levels, and think that they're good, and calorically they are, but a lot of processed food is stripping the food of its nutrients and fiber and just like keeping those macronutrients in it, so you'll be missing out on a lot of stuff. So that's why you got to eat your fruits and veggies and all that. And also another thing is fiber, which I briefly mentioned with carbohydrates. Fiber weightage in your system, like a lot of the stuff in fruits, vegetables, whole grains. It adds volume to a meal, and it also makes it so like food can move through your digestive system, because there's two types: soluble, meaning can be absorbed, and insoluble, which means it isn't. So your body doesn't even like break it down at all; it just goes right through. But that's actually still beneficial because it signals to your body that there's stuff in your body, and it makes your digestive system start moving and like getting things through, stuff that will just like sit in your stomach forever, and make sure it just keeps going. And water, felt the need to mention this. So the recommended daily intake for women is 2.7 liters, men 3.7 liters, but that's a very rough guideline. Pretty much like if you're sweating in the summer, it's really hot, you're working out a lot, obviously you're going to need a little bit more water than if it's dead of winter and you're not working out at all and exerting the fluids from your body. So basically just make sure you're drinking throughout the day when you're thirsty and listening to your body in terms of that. Okay, so last thing I want to talk about is how to know what your caloric needs are. I have this very complicated equation, but it's actually not that complicated. It just looks complicated. So here are your variables. We got age, which is A, weight in pounds, W, height in inches, which is H, and then your activity level. So if you want to figure out what yours is right now, I can walk it through with you. If you want to get like a pencil and paper and a calculator, that might help you, unless you're like amazing at math, which I am not. So here's the equation, and there's one for men and one for women. So you just want to write down everything. So for age in years, I'm 20 years old, so 20, weight in pounds, height in inches. And then for activity level, what you can do is on a scale of 1 to 2. So here are the examples of where you want to fall. So somewhere in between 1 and 2 on a decimal. So think of like how much exercise you're doing. This is like the hard part and where you kind of have to guess a little bit. So let me know when you know which one you are, and I'll move on because I don't want to go away from the screen quite yet. I don't know if I have the chat open. Oh, okay. Awesome. So you got yours. And then you got that. So we're going to go over here and just plug in your numbers. So I have my example right here just so you can follow along. I got the number 20 for A, 120 for W, 64. So remember height in inches. So you want to take, if you're 5 foot something, then you want to multiply the 5 by 12. So that's 60 right there, and then just add the leftover. So like I'm 5'4", so I'm going to take 60 plus 4, and I got 64. And 1.7. So you actually won't need the 1.7 first. You just want to plug in your numbers like I did there, and then add it all up first. And I'll give you some time to do the math there. All right. Okay, thank you so much for staying on. At least I gave you some time to do some math. I'll try and finish this up really quick, just in case the power flickers again. I'll be able to like get there as much as possible. So I assume you got your numbers. So basically the first number you get, that's called your basal metabolic rate. So right here, that 1378 before I multiplied the 1.7, the activity level, basically means that if I was like a vegetable, that is how many calories I would need to survive. Meaning like I literally just sat and like didn't move all day. But there's like a lot of processes we do. Even then, like honestly, you fidget and like do a little bit. So with your activity level, then in there, when you multiply it, that is your like amount of calories that you need to not gain or not lose any weight. Just stay the exact same. That's what you need to function. Of course, this is an estimate. The best way to know this is just to, if you really want to know, like you have to test it for yourself. Because there are things where there are times when you like on your period you would need a little bit more probably if you're stressed, things like that basically. And great, sorry, I was just looking at your chat. Yeah, basically things like that. There's always like times in your life you're under a lot of stress, you're doing things that like you might need a little bit more, you might need a little bit less. So of course this is just an estimate, but yeah, this would just be like without gaining or losing any weight. If you wanted to gain weight or you wanted to lose weight, then you would have to add in either a caloric deficit, so lower your calories, or increase your expenditure of activity, or you would have to add calories if you wanted to gain weight. And that is pretty much it. Obviously, you want to like eat healthier. There's lots of ways you could try and lower your calories, but at the end of the day, like calories lower than what you're burning, you lose weight, calories higher, you gain weight. And that is the basic math of it. And it's always recommended to add small deficits and small surpluses, simply because if you gain too much or too little in a short amount of time, it can really mess with your body. You want to, if you like have a lot of fat to lose, for example, and you have this huge deficit, then obviously your body gets used to whatever you do. So you'll find that your weight loss is going to like plateau. So what you want to do is keep some like go little by little and see how much progress you make. And that'll also help you to preserve muscle and not like just like gain a bunch of fat by like if I just ate like a ton of food, I would mostly gain fat and not really gain muscle, even if I was weight training. Or if you like cut your calories, a lot of that is going to come from muscle. Your muscle is going to drop right away. So of course, always do small deficits, small surpluses, simply for sustainability and like overall health. It's just better for you. Oh, another thing is that pie chart I showed of the like 50% carbs, 30% whatever for protein and all that. That is very like, it's not saying you have to do that. There are different things that work better for different people. Some people, of course, don't like carbs at all and they function. That's not really recommended, but like you can manipulate that to what works for you a little bit. Main takeaway here, always focus on eating more, meaning more fruits, more veggies, more nutrient dense foods. Even if your goal is to lose weight, I find that focusing on eating more volume like will achieve that, because if you're eating a lot of processed like dense caloric foods, you're not going to feel as full and you're just going to keep eating all these calories that aren't doing much for you. So if there is something to cut out, I would recommend processed foods. Of course, it's hard to like not eat anything processed nowadays. That's just part of it, and they're not going to kill you. Of course, everything in moderation, but Hey, so that was basically the whole presentation. I just came back on, wanted to say thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, you can ask me here, but I want to put my Instagram in the chat just in case I lose power again. You can just DM me anything you want to say, just in case, like, if we lose power again, I'll just go. And yeah, you can just send me a DM. But until then, if as long as we're good right now, is there anything you were confused about, wanted me to go over again, or any questions in general?
Like what's like a good thing to eat like before exercise or after exercise?
So on this, in terms of exercise, most like dietitians would recommend carbs before exercise, um, simply because you want to have a lot of energy. Um, I have seen a study that said specifically fructose and glucose, so like fruit and then like glucose, like a fast acting carb. But I think as long as you get like a little bit of carbs in, it'll definitely benefit you. After, they also recommend carbs, but also, especially if you're trying to build muscle in general, like strength training, then protein is a good thing afterwards. It's been shown to help you like build muscle afterwards. I will say that timing of like what you eat is definitely like less on the hierarchic scale of importance in terms of like eating healthy in general, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. What was your name?
Lillian?